Welcome to the next chapter with Jen Bryan. Today, I am so fortunate to be joined by Emily Colligan in Canada. Hi, Emily. How are you doing?
I am awesome. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. I am so excited to have you on the show today for the next chapter with Jen Bryan. Can you please tell the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, honestly, I'm so excited to be here, and just the fact that you're offering this and talking more about it, about mental health. And so I'm actually a hypnotherapist and coach, and I specialize in helping people heal from those wounds from childhood that keep them in toxic relationships. So things like codependency, narcissistic abuse. And just to give a brief overview of what got me into it, because this is my life purpose, my life passion. I'm so just this is part of my heart when I talk about these things. And I suffered from CPTSD, and I could not function for years and years. And I was just trying to figure out am I broken? What's wrong with me? Because when you don't have the right guidance or know what you're really going through, you automatically think that there is something inherently wrong with you. And I was just trying to find so many different approaches that would have worked. And I didn't know at the time that I was stuck in symptom management. So I was trying all these EFT, or watching so many videos, getting more knowledge, not realizing that trauma is in the body. It's in your subconscious. So if you're not doing any work on that level, everything that you're doing consciously is just coping. It doesn't create any permanent shifts. And I started to research more things that take into account working with that. And honestly, just going through that myself and going through a huge breakthrough my own healing, and then being able to offer that to others. And because I've been through myself, I know what it is to be in tremendous amount of pain and suffering. Just to have those tools to then help others take what they've been through and turn it into something beautiful is honestly the biggest gift. And I'm just I'm so grateful to be able to do this. And just to make people feel less alone in the process, because I know how alone that can feel.
Absolutely. And as a fellow complex PTSD survivor here, I understand how important it is to bring awareness and advocacy to mental health and destigmatizing it, because so many people think they're inherently flawed if they're suffering with the effects of anxiety and depression after a diagnosis of complex PTSD. So for the viewers out there that don't know what complex PTSD is, could you give them an overview from your point of view?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, trauma is not always these big events. It could literally be anything that overwhelms your system, that you're left feeling helpless and you can't cope with it. So basically that response gets locked in your body at the time of when it happened. And CPTSD is more things that consistently happen that put you in a state of overwhelm. So this can look from childhood. So childhood trauma from neglect or abuse. And then let's say in your adulthood, if you're married or in a relationship to a narcissist and it's ongoing emotional abuse or physical abuse in some cases, things like that really affect how your nervous system is functioning, where you're stuck living in survival. And it actually affects your neuroception. So basically you're seeing danger wherever you go. And you get so stuck there that your body doesn't feel safe anymore. So really the whole process of moving out of that is healing all those emotions, all those responses that are stuck in time, and creating all these symptoms, right? If we have anxiety, if we have depression, if we have eating disorders, all these things that are external that we can label, they are just symptoms of a deeper rooted issue that comes from these earlier traumas. And so I believe in really getting at the root of it, not just, okay, if you have eating problem, just remove junk food from your house or just stop eating, all these logical processes, but that's never going to change something. And I just have so many people come to me and be I don't get it. I've tried everything. I've been at this for so many years, but literally nothing has changed, which it makes sense because they're never addressing the real issue. And, you know, like I said, trauma is not always these big things. And sometimes, like, if we've been emotionally neglected, it flies underneath the radar. Like, we don't realize that it has happened until we start to see how it affects our relationships. You know, when we have social anxiety, these things that come up, because it all stems to that. So it's like almost like invisible to the eye, but it comes out through how we relate to others and just how we are like in our body.
Absolutely. And till 5.5 years ago, I was in complete denial of complex trauma and that I had it and I couldn't do mind over matter. And I spoke at the Capitol 3 years ago at Mental Health Matters Day as someone that was in the media and had all these degrees and could no longer function because I was so debilitated at that point by the depression, anxiety, and the complex PTSD, because it was such a cumulative effect. It wasn't just one thing, it was so many things. And at some point when you have complex PTSD, you can't deny it anymore. Like the trauma of like the series of things, whether it's the relationship with your parents or siblings or whatever it is, it does typically start in childhood. And then typically you mirror those behaviors into adulthood when you haven't figured out how to heal that trauma or deal with it. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And like, yeah, and it gets repressed where like it won't affect you. And maybe like, you know, then things come into your life that trigger it, and then it comes to the surface. And, you know, like a lot of us tend to dismiss it instead of actually realizing that there is like a bigger problem there. And so the more like we suppress and suppress, we just stay stuck in this traumatized state. And a lot of the times we don't know it. We don't know any better. We don't know what we're going through. So, and because like, if you tell someone about that, they might, you know, judge you or say like, you're crazy or all these things, depending on like what they know about it. So it's like we stay in silence. And even though like we're really hurting, which is such a sad thing, like imagine like you're in pain and like you can't share it with anybody because they're going to judge you. And at the same time, like you feel shame because you're carrying on to this and you don't even know like why you're feeling that way. So it's a lot to navigate. So I think just like, you know, I think just like people having the courage to reach out is like already a huge step in their process.
I think a lot of times also we try to shove things down. I know for myself this past week, survival mode kicks on. So I don't allow myself to feel those emotions because I can't cope at the moment. And I just kind of keep trying to put it off, even though I know I'm going to have to deal with it at some point. And part of the journey of trying to heal yourself is being able to do it in the moment and allowing yourself to feel however you feel. And it's scary and it's overwhelming to so many people because it's so much pain and you don't know how to process that. And I think for a lot of people, when we talk about an epidemic of drug use and alcoholism and trauma is a gateway drug to being able to eating disorders, to body dysmorphia, to drugs, alcohol, any sort of substances you put into your body because you cannot deal or try to take out of your body. It stems from childhood trauma typically. I found in my research. I don't know if you have a different opinion about that, but I would love to hear what you think.
Yeah, no, a lot of the origins are from childhood trauma. And like I mentioned before, like a lot of like the emotional neglect you can't see, right? It's like invisible to the eye, but then it manifests in these ways. And I think like, yeah, like you said, a lot of like that drug use, being an alcoholic, it's to regulate all those strong emotions that we feel like we can't cope with that come from childhood. So when that trigger comes up, we're reliving that same experience because it hasn't been processed and completed yet. And I think like a huge step to like healing is learning those tools to work through it and to regulate it, because trauma happens because there's too much too soon. So I hear a lot of people say, oh, just feel all your feelings at once. But no, because then that puts you into more overwhelm. And so you get stuck in it versus processing it. So like, I think it's about like building your window of tolerance, like what you can handle, but building it slowly and like allowing yourself to feel at a capacity where you can actually integrate it, instead of like going into that fight or flight or shutdown state. So like, I think like when you are more trauma informed and you understand that, you can better support someone in their emotions to, like moving past it. But I feel like a lot of therapists are not like enough trauma informed, like in what they learn in school. And so they don't know how to like explain that to clients or really help them to get more safe in their bodies.
And part of healing from trauma is learning to say no and set boundaries and limits, which is like, that feeling of selfishness, because you feel worthless at that point. When you're dealing with trauma, when it's been happening for such a long time, people typically blame themselves and think it's their fault that they feel that way and they can't control it.
Oh yeah. And like, we read all these books and they give us all these like amazing strategies to logically apply. But the thing is, like, we're not driven by our thoughts. We're driven by our nervous system. And if our nervous system links boundaries with unsafety, it's automatically out of our awareness going to react and put us into that trauma response that we learned to cope, right? So either we shut down, we appease them, maybe we like fight back. And so we can't just fight our physiology. We have to actually find ways to heal those responses and then update those beliefs that we've taken from that experience. Like, let's say in childhood, like you're always like punished or shamed for saying no, then you link abandonment with boundaries. And that's what's showing up in that moment when you're trying to set a boundary. So of course, like if it's going to lead to abandonment and, then all those feelings come up once again and you shut down or you don't set the boundary, but it's not happening at a logical capacity where you can override it. And it's not your fault. So, like, and it can also give people more shame because people are like, oh, we'll just say no. Oh, well, okay, well, I can't.
Yeah, that goes back to the attachment issues, which I like love how you talk about those, because how we learn how to cope in our childhood, and when our parents are modeling that for us, when we feel like we're going to be abandoned, our emotional needs are neglected or told, like, in my case, I was told emotions is a sign of weakness. So suck it up, just like shove it down. And so when I have to deal with feelings now, I'm like, oh God, like I don't want to be girly. Like, it's so hard and such a struggle to cope even to this day because of the hardwiring. It's basically, I feel like brainwashing, like as a child. Like this is the tape that plays in your mind. It's invisible and you're just reacting to the world and the stimulus. But when it's been so ingrained and reaffirmed over and over again by the people that are supposed to love you the most, I feel like it mirrors then in your adult relationships very similar. And you continue to attract the same sort of dynamic until you heal yourself.
Yeah, it becomes like your default setting. And like, think about it, like your brain gets programmed like in childhood where you absorb everything and it's part of your subconscious mind, right? And that's what drives 95% of your behavior. Only 5% comes from your conscious mind. So even though you know better or you want to do better, that part of you just comes in and overrides those intentions you have. So it's like when you heal, you get both of those parts of your brain in alignment where you can actually do those things. And there's no like trying to like force your way into it. It becomes your new default mode. So you're reprogramming what you learned. And that's so great because like you can change your brain. It's not stuck a certain way. And because if you learned it, it's not like who you are as a person and you can unlearn it and your brain can then absorb new things. But it also takes repetition to create those new neurons that wire it together enough where that's just how you end up like showing up in that response in boundaries and relationships and social settings, all those things.
So you specialize in RTT therapy, correct?
Yeah.
So how does that help reprogram the brain and heal trauma? Because I have not heard about it before in the format that you deliver it.
Yeah, no, so I did a lot of research myself, like trying to figure out, okay, what really works. And so RTT, it combines, like, it's not just one type of therapy. It combines psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, NLP, CBT. So it's like a mixture of stuff that really help get to the root cause of why you're feeling anxious, of why you're depressed, of why you're doing this and that. So it's not like just focusing on, oh, let's manage your symptoms. And it's giving you a permanent solution and understanding of like, oh, wow, that's why I do that. And then from there, you can heal that experience and you can attach a new belief to it. So you're reframing that experience. So because we can't change the past, it is what it is, but we can change how we relate to it. Right? So let's say like when you're young, you personalize everything. Your brain doesn't have the capacity to like logically understand that, okay, you know, like mom is unstable. That's why she's acting like this. It's just like, oh, well, mom's not loving me. So it must mean that I'm unworthy. And yeah, these beliefs, they get wired into us. And so like with RTT, you can rewire those beliefs and like implant in new ones. But because it's going deep enough at the root of like when it first got created, of when you like acquire that, it helps to actually like resolve it for good. So like when I work with a lot of people in toxic relationships and they're like, I don't understand. I'm always attracting the same kinds of people. I've done all this work on myself. Yes, you probably have. And I never discredit that, but you probably haven't gone deep enough into your subconscious mind and done that kind of work where it actually resolves that wound at the level of where it originates at. So it can actually liberate you from it and change it, not just change it like at a thought level or a belief level, but a feeling, embodied level. Because I think like that's what needs to happen. You need to feel differently, to choose things, to act differently. So that's how RTT goes deep enough where a lot of modalities I think fall short. And it gives people the ability to then work through their issues a lot quicker than if they just spent years trying to talk about it or watch another video, because those things, they don't help, they don't fix it. They just give you more knowledge, which knowledge is great and it's part of the puzzle, definitely. But that alone will never fix it. So you'll be stuck for years and years because it needs to happen at that subconscious level. So that's why I love doing this work, because I see people like literally transform in front of my eyes. And I'm just like, wow. And we really like, sometimes they're so surprised, like, that's why, like from that experience, like you're kind of shocked because yes, like from your adult self, you're like, that's not a big deal. But to your child self, that traumatized everything in your body. And it was holding on to that. And it's kind of like going back. A lot of the process is going back to reparent that part of you that's frozen in time and giving that younger part what it needed to move past it and to let go of those beliefs and those emotions. Because like, yeah, we grow up, but those younger parts of us are still living inside of us. And anytime something is similar in our external, it activates us. And that part of us is now showing up, not our adult selves. So that's why that part comes in and chooses your romantic partners for you, because it's like, oh, I know that. That's familiar. Let's go over there, even though it's unhealthy. Like, and you know the red flags, you know what to look out for. But because that part of you is still active and unhealed and looking to be healed, and it's doing this through others as if it's your own parent, then it just gets stuck. So I find like RTD is very powerful in helping you just release that and actually choose your life going forward and create what you want.
I totally agree. I was thinking about when you were talking about that, like about reparenting, and I've had to work on that the last several years, like being able to give the inner child that voice that didn't have it as a child, and being able to deal with those feelings that came up, and like being able to, you know, overcome those fears and like validate that existence that did happen, that never got that validation as a child. And people kind of think you're crazy, or like you have to go back and talk to your inner child, but it's something very freeing.
Yeah, I know. It sounds so weird, but really like your inner child, it's just like your emotional brain, right? It's just like where all like your needs, your emotions are like suppressed from childhood. And that's like all like your programming. So it's not like, oh, I have like this like younger part of me just like chilling in my body somewhere, you know, popping up. It's just like it's a part, imagine, but it's just a part of like your brain that gets activated out of protection, really, because it's like, oh, like this hurt me in the past. Let me go. Let me search for like what helped me cope back then. Oh, okay, I have to people please in this moment, so let's go do that. But like you're not consciously choosing this. It's just happening because if that part is not healed, it still thinks it's in that situation. So it's going to respond the same way, of course, right?
Absolutely.
So when you complete those experiences and you make it a health, like you make it a safer environment, then you're able to actually, oh, I don't need those coping mechanisms anymore. Your body learns, oh, okay, that is done now. And now I can actually choose differently.
Do you feel like unhealed trauma leads to the self-destructive behaviors? Because I found for myself, the more I healed and dealt with the childhood trauma, that I'm less inclined to be self-destructive, because you're identifying those needs and being able to go back and meet the needs of the inner child, and you want to choose differently. When you're reprogramming yourself, those behaviors tend to decrease, have you found? I'm just talking about myself personally, so I'd love to hear your input.
Yeah, and definitely they can decrease. Like I've done it myself, and like, you know, like I said, I was so debilitated with like my own trauma that like, you know, I was anxious constantly. Like I would have panic attacks like 15, 20 times a day. And so I think just being able to do that consistently, but not at a conscious level, like really doing this, healing those parts of ourselves somatically, that's what creates that inner change. And yeah, definitely, like when you're self-destructive, it's not because you want to, it's because those coping mechanisms are what you know, right? Like let's say like when you were young, like the way you learned how to cope was just through like binging on food. So you're self-destructive on that, but not because like you're purposely wanting to hurt yourself. You're actually, your brain is so wired to avoid pain that it will do it in the easiest, fastest way possible. So it might look on the outside like it's self-destructive, but your behavior always has a purpose, and that purpose is to avoid some type of unconscious pain. And that's why our behaviors are extreme, right? Like extreme behaviors come from extreme internal pain.
And I think it's a need to self-soothe. You're trying to self-soothe in the moment and to calm the pain down, like calm ourselves down. And so much of the struggle with that is having to figure out how to deal with those triggers and not resort to those behaviors in those moments, and recognizing that you're triggered.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like it's a process, but I think once you deal with the root cause and like heal those wounds, those emotions are not so overpowering anymore. So when you do get triggered, you realize like, okay, like, yeah, this still triggers me, but the intensity is like so much less that now in this moment, I can actually calm myself down and I can use my logical mind, get it back online and choose what I want to do in this moment. Whereas if you're just still living from those unresolved wounds, it's going to feel impossible to make a different choice. Like you're being hijacked by it. So that's why like I think like once you like heal those wounds, like it gives you back choice.
Absolutely. And what was the turning point for you personally, like to be able to get on this road to healing and then be able to help others? The next chapter with Jen Bryan's about giving the pain a purpose. Like, what was your turning point that made you be able to go down this road?
Yeah. So, like I had a breaking point and like I had a total like mental breakdown. Like the way like I learned how to cope with everything was through overachieving. And so I would always hit like extreme burnouts. But there was like this one point in my life where it was like the worst burnout ever. I could not function on any level. I broke down and I checked myself in at the hospital because I was like, I can't go to work. I can't do anything right now. And when they assessed me, you know, they labeled me with all these disorder, like mental illnesses, said that I needed to be on medication for the rest of my life, said that this is just who I am, and that like I would just have to like learn like coping strategies to like not be so self-destructive or like try and somewhat manage like my anxiety levels. And I was just like, what? Like, no, like, that's so unfair to tell me that, in a sense where like I'm hopeless to this whole situation. That wasn't even my fault. Like, the only reason why like I'm acting that way is because of what happened to me. And I didn't choose my family. I didn't choose that for myself. So it's not who I am. That's not my true nature. And like I was just so like, I didn't want to believe that that was the truth of my situation. I was like, no, like there has to be another way. And so I like went on like this whole like like reading every book I could, taking courses, certifications here and there, and just like really immersing myself in whatever I could. And that's when I started to learn more about like a different way of healing, like a more holistic approach, working with the body, working with reprogramming the subconscious mind. And yeah, like I was just so committed to, no, I'm going to find a solution, because there's no way in hell I'm going to let others go through, like feel this way too. Right. So it's like finding myself a solution at the same time, wanting to like help others through that and telling them that like, you're not stuck, you're not broken, there's nothing wrong with you, like you can heal from this. And that just like motivated me so much to like just try everything, until I got to a point where I was just like, well, obviously like I always have things to learn about. I don't know everything here, like, but I know enough to help myself and others included to move past their trauma, which like, yeah, I just think that like giving people that option and also that hope to be like, no, like you don't have to stay that way. Like you don't have to depend on medication. Depends the situation there, depends like your diagnosis, but like it's not going to be like they don't have to stay attached to that. They can use those experiences, they can grow from them, and they can create like the best life like possible. Like I use all that pain to now have this business, helping others, doing what I love. So it goes to show that it is possible. And I know so many people have also done that for themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree with you 100%. And I'm so, so thankful that you came on here today with me, Emily. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the next chapter with Jen Bryan. And you have to tune in next week to see what we have in store for you next.